Hello, hello, visionaries. So excited to be here for another powerful interviews, really about what happens behind the scenes as you are scaling beyond six figures and what does that really look like. And I'm a firm believer that successful people do it anyway. It's not that we're luckier, we're not smarter, we don't have more money, we don't have better connections. We just figure out ways to align with how we are creating our life and our businesses in a really powerful way. And that's really what I wanted to highlight with this interview series that we've been doing on the podcast. So super excited that you're here joining us in. Today, I have the amazing Tina Lorenz, who is a transformational business coach and just a dear friend and absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, super excited. And she has an epic personal story to share with you. Just her journey has been amazing. So this is one of the many reasons why she's here today, because I wanted to really highlight, the story, the journey that she's been on that's been really inspiring. And so let's just kick it off and tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that you have been on to get to the business that you have now.
Well, thank you. What I always say, I'm the poster child for late bloomers and really an unlikely success story, because I didn't start doing what I'm doing online until I was already past 50. But let's back up from that, because how I got there was very unlikely. So I was on my own when I was 17 years old, literally had to go out the bedroom window to make my way to Seattle. Grew up in a very dysfunctional family, would just kind of check all the boxes of all the things that go on in dysfunctional families. And that basically was what I was experiencing. And so I did have an old car because I'd been working as a cashier. So I drove myself to Seattle and I went to court and got myself emancipated because I was only 17, so I could start making my own decisions. But really, that whole portion of my life was more about surviving, just how am I going to survive? And I had no concept that I could ever do anything beyond things like clerical work, childcare, that food service, that type of thing. And that is what I did. I went to work in a hospital as a clerk and eventually got married. Long story short, that was 18 years of a not great marriage, but two amazing children. And after my divorce, I ended up meeting someone that those signals went off that something wasn't quite right, but I didn't trust myself at that point to believe that. And that's a huge lesson that I had to learn, of really following that intuitive guidance that was already being gifted to me from what I call a higher source, really. I thought it was just me because I had been out of the dating pool for 18 years. And it ended up being, in less than 1 year, a horrendous domestic violence scenario. We were living on a yacht in Seattle, my two children and myself, with this individual. And we had to run for our lives. He had me cornered and was ready to end my life with a .357 Magnum. I didn't know at the time that's what it was, but that's what type of gun it was. And that began a long siege of me being homeless, losing everything, every physical possession we had, and going into a shelter and being stalked for 2 years by this individual. So working my way through all of that, I eventually met my amazing husband, Ron, and we began building a life together from absolutely nothing. And we started traveling in an RV because of being stalked. And so we started moving from place to place. I got my kids situated in schools and things. And I found out I had an ability to be able to talk to people. And we were selling stuff. We started selling physical products, color changing mugs, hand painted denim shirts, and each time we became like the top seller in the country of these things we were selling. And I was like, wow, I wish I knew how to be on this thing called online, but I had no idea, absolutely no idea. And we started doing promotional tours for big ad agencies. We weren't selling anything, but we were inviting people into an event. They were multi-million-dollar tours like Got Milk and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So again, I was really kind of honing my skills to be able to talk to people, but it was very grueling work. And so by this time I'd hit my 50s and it was getting to be pretty heavy duty. And my husband also happens to be legally blind and his vision was getting even worse. And so we were in this old mobile home in Yuma, Arizona, green shag carpeting, plastic sinks, the whole bit. But we had a beautiful view. And I was looking online for what am I going to do? Because I'm really the breadwinner here. He was not able to do the work he used to do, anything like that. So I saw an article about copywriting. And there was something about it that it just kind of lit me up. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it, the actual writing of marketing materials, But I literally broke out in a sweat and I went out and said to my husband, I can do this. I believe I can do this. Unfortunately, he has great faith in me. And so we did what any sane person would do. I sold our house so that I have some money to get started with. This old mobile home. I went down to the Thrifty Nickel in town and I had an ad for the house. And somehow I just knew to sell the view because we had this amazing view of the saguaro cactus with the arms and the mountain range and a golf course in the distance, unobstructed view. And so I took a photo of it and said, I want to run this ad and here's the photo. And they were like, well, don't you want a picture of the mobile home? I said, nope, gonna that's what I'm selling. I'm selling the view. And that's what I did. And the very first people that came to look at it paid cash. And we had another set of people sitting at the end of the driveway waiting. And I looked at them and said, well, these people are waiting to look at it too. So, what do you want to do? And they said, we'll take it. And that's how we started, so that I could get going as a copywriter, because we also had an old RV, so we just moved into it. And so that was the beginning of the journey. But the amazing thing is, and people have asked me since, how did you do what you did in your first year? Because I had no experience. I'd never been paid to write anything. I've been sort of entrepreneurial, but not really in a serious sense of really understanding what all that meant. Kind of accidental entrepreneur, I guess you'd say. And I began, but with complete steadfast focus that this was it. I was going to be this person who could write marketing copy. And in my first year, I made $500,000. I didn't have a website for most of that. As I said, I had no experience. It was kind of staying 3 steps ahead, with starting off with just the very basics of writing what we call a sales letter. Not really very well at first. I only charged a few $100s for the first one I wrote, but it worked. It was for a woman that was having an event, and she sold out her event with my letter. And so I just kept going from there. And by the end of the year, I had raised my fees and become known enough that I did the $500,000 my first year. And so by the second year, I hit 7 figures the second year. And I always say, don't do the math, because that was 19 years ago. And just kept going. That's an
amazing story, Tina, in so many ways. I mean, totally riveting, for one, but just the unwavering faith in yourself. I mean, what do you think? I mean, truly, because we talk a lot about, perspective and the mindset that we have as we're really creating what it is they want. I think that is a big piece of the equation. It's not the whole equation, but it's definitely a big piece. But when you read this thing, you never heard about copywriting, not in your life, right? You have the faith in yourself after everything you've been through. And I too grew up with a tremendous amount of trauma in my life and been through a lot. And I know what that does to our mindset and how we think about ourselves and our self-worth and all of those things. What do you think truly made you have that level of faith in yourself after everything you've been through and everything that's really been beating you down all those years?
I had to really think about that, because people have asked me, how did you do that? And I always say, when I end up teaching copywriting, for example, I say, I'm not saying anyone else is going to do what I did, the way I did it, as far as money and all of that. And I think there's just really, it's multifaceted. How did I do that? Because I realized eventually, paying more attention, that I always had this inner guidance that was happening, that I just knew somehow, even at a very young age, it was from outside of myself. It was something greater than me that was guiding me and instructing me. For example, with the incident, the boat incident, as we shall call it, I knew I was going to be shot in the head momentarily. He was literally like a couple feet from me loading, and I was cornered. And when I was in my 40s, and when I was in my 20s, I had this vivid mental picture of darkness and being shot in the back of the head. And it was just like this flash. It wasn't a dream. I was awake, and it completely freaked me out. I was crying. I told my mother, "Oh, it's just your imagination," but I didn't know why that had happened. And in that moment, like 20 some years later, I knew this was the moment that I had been shown. And so it were things like that it was just kind of like, this is it, all the hair on my neck, right? Everything in me said, this is going to happen if you don't do something like right now. And so it was moments like that happened all through my life that I just kind of, and like even knowing that this was a bad dude, that he was a psychopath, truly, he really was. And it was really like looking into the face of evil. But at the time, when I first met him, it seemed very charming, but yet there was something telling me something's not right. And I didn't listen. I didn't pay attention. So it was starting to realize that these things that were guiding me, like this flash of inspiration, I can be this, I can do this. That was one thing. But the other thing was, I think, just some of the experience I had just face to face with selling mugs and selling shirts and getting people to participate in a free event on these big marketing tours. I had begun to realize that I had an ability to communicate, and that I'd always liked books. I'd always liked words. I did a lot of reading when I was a kid. And it was somehow when I read about the copywriting, it was putting together this communication aspect with words was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this, right? Because I know we became top sellers selling these silly mugs and denim shirts, right? Top sellers in the country without ads or internet or anything like that, just face to face doing this. We got invited inside the Pentagon to do it, actually. And so I think that was one other part. My husband's absolute unwavering belief in me, even when no one else ever had in my family. I was actually told I talked too much and be quiet, these kinds of things. I wasn't believed when I told him things that were going on. And so I was getting freer to be able to speak. But the other thing was I was really excited about it. I just was like really kind of on fire with, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this next. And so when I look back at it, I realized I never even entertained the thought of failure. I simply did not. And I was really just focused on, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to just gobble it all up and learn as much as I can, as fast as I can. And even to the point where I literally had to say to my husband, how much money am I making? I really took the focus off of it has to be this many dollars, and kind of lost track. As a matter of fact, I have something in my drawer that I keep as a reminder because many years into this, or that I should like to admit, this was how I did my accounting, right? With this very ruler, I would go down the line, you know, when it was tax time, I'd be crying because I'm trying to put together the numbers using this one line at a time. And it'd be like, oh, I made that much money. You know, so there was something about that, I think, that was also, and it happened especially during 2008, during the recession. I have another story about that, but it was just really like just kind of celebrating that I was able to do this thing and feeling like this will never go away. This is a skill I'll have all my life that I can do something with. So, but I also invested in myself as fast as I could, and that because I knew I had to learn. And so the very first thing I went to was a thing called the Bensavenga 100 that was in New York City. Gary Bensavenga is still considered one of the greatest living copywriters in the world. And the irony of it was that he was having his one and only event, live event, was like a celebration of his career, New York, Madison Avenue, the whole bit, because he was retiring from public view, so to speak, as a copywriter. He was going to have one event. I was about the same age as Gary, and I was just getting started. And so that was one of the ironic aspects of it. But $5,000, and he didn't take credit cards, and I didn't have a credit card at that point, and I certainly didn't have $5,000. And so the mindset aspect came into this because I started putting Post-it notes around my computer. I'm at Gary Bensavenga's. I'm in New York City. I have $5,000, you know, and I got it. I started raising my fees, and I just kept at it, and I was able to send a check for the $5,000. Went to the event, had an amazing experience because I also went with the mindset, the intention of how I was going to interact with the people there, because I knew it was going to be top of the line as far as people that were in publishing and marketers and that type of thing. It ended up being the 150. He ended up letting about 50 more people in just because so many people wanted to be there. But I left that event with about $100,000 of work booked, and that turned into 500. I met Gary Halbert, the late great Gary Halbert, and I had a 2-page letter I'd written that brought in $4 million. It was a direct mail letter. It was like 5 months into being a copywriter, right? And I showed it to him. He invited me to his event. And so the networking aspect really began. I really started realizing this was the way, was to be there, be in the room where it was happening, and to meet the right people and give value to them with the conversations that we had. So.
That's so amazing. What an amazing story. And I just want to unpack a little bit just for the people who are listening. Because
like this 50,000 foot elevation view of a speed dating.
Yeah. No, I love it. And then one, right, was I think that this piece of having this flash when you were in your 20s and then being there in that moment and then being able to look at that when you were having that same kind of guidance feeling that this was the moment where you needed to kind of seize the moment and jump on this thing that you felt super aligned with, but knowing that this inner knowing had literally saved your life.
Yeah.
Right. So there was this sense that I can trust this voice. I can trust this guidance that's coming through, which I think
it was the one I could trust for a long time. Yeah.
Which was incredible, right? So that thing, I think, is just like, whoa, really powerful. And then having your husband who just totally believed in you. Now, I think I too have an amazing husband who, like, you know, he's totally behind all my crazy journeys and all my crazy jumps off the ledge stories that I've had in my life. And, you know, and whatever, he just goes with it, you know, trust me. But I think a lot of us may not have that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your spouse, because I think being an entrepreneur, most people don't understand what in the world we are doing and what we are doing.
Those crazy folks, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I equate being an entrepreneur with jumping off a 20-story building and building a plane on the way down and hoping not to crash in between. You know, it's a little bit like that. And so, you know, that thing, but having somebody that has that unwavering belief in you that really you can lean on and believe in you, I think is powerful. And this is where we can tap into other entrepreneurial communities, joining a mastermind, you know, finding colleagues or people who are entrepreneurs that you can connect with. who understand what you're up to a little bit more than maybe your immediate family and your spouse or your close friends even sometimes don't get it. Because like I said, we are very unique species being entrepreneurs, figuring this stuff out. So I love that. And then this other piece of just knowing your strengths, really understanding that you are amazing at networking and connecting and talking to people and selling and building a business that's really around your strengths.
What's funny is I've never thought of myself, I would not say that I was an extrovert. We work alone, a lot of us. I work in silence. I'm not one of those, I always said I miss that entrepreneurial gene that requires loud music and 3 other things happening in the room while you're working, or I'm going to Starbucks to work, I'm going to the shared workspace. I was like, no, for me, that's no. So, I work in silence. I have to have a view, and I bet you can relate to that as well. If just the ambiance, the atmospheric conditions. I had someone yesterday say, "Is your background real?" When we were on a Zoom call, yes, it's very real. This is what my life looks like. This is how I live. It's real. It's not punching any holes in it or anything. But it's like being able to flip that switch though, of knowing when it's okay. It's time. It's go time, right? And not going to sit in the corner at the event and not talk to anybody. And then when you shift off of yourself and really more to the people that you are serving, the people that you can help with something, even not thinking, oh, well, maybe they've got money, that kind of thing, but really being truly interested in what they're doing, because I love marketing. And I love seeing for people what they can't see for themselves, because we're so close to some of our superpowers. We take them for granted sometimes. And I always say the worst client you'll ever have is yourself, right? They're such a pain in the butt, but being able to see that for someone else and just really have that excitement for them, what's possible for them, and have the conversation of, have you considered this? Or, oh, you know what I can see for you with that is, have you ever thought of that? And that's the kind of conversations I was having of, I get it, and I literally would have people say, you get it, back at me. And how could we work together, and it just, one thing can lead to another with that. But anyway, I'm probably going off track here, but
I think this is super powerful. What you're speaking to, the sense that I'm the same way, I'm an introvert really at heart, and I love my peace and quiet working from home. And
your retro lamp, you love your retro lamp. I love your retro.
I love my retro. I love my mid-century. This is my thing, right? And so, so I totally relate to that. But this idea of, and I think when I first started going to big events, I was having a hard time at those big events. Like, it was hard for me to be that extroverted. And I would also really thinking about myself. Do I fit in? Am I good enough? All the things. And so I would kind of collapse onto myself and feel a little isolated. But of course, this is the beauty of getting older. Yay. We give less and less F's about what people think and how we show up, and we trust the process. And so there is some grace in that. And I think as I'm getting older now, I just have a lot of fun connecting with people and having a good time.
Yeah. And the age thing, I mean, it's there. Okay. And I will admit to having moments where I think, am I the oldest person in the room? Yeah. Kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't really think about that, because I also believe I have way more energy than a lot of people have my age. For example, I do all the driving. My husband's legally blind, and I have a mobile office that's a 45-foot long semi. It looks like a semi truck that we completely customized into a mobile office. I can work from anywhere. I tow a lime green Jeep behind that. And I do all the driving of something that's why I ended up doing things I never thought I could do. Right. And I think that's the other aspect of being open to learning, open to continuous growth, and not doing it alone, even though we say, well, I work alone and I work in silence a lot of the time. I don't think it's a journey you can do all by yourself. I immediately started seeking out mentors, and I started investing in myself, because I knew I was going to have to up the game here of my skills and just understanding the strategy, understanding what would work for my clients and how I could help them with that. And then that evolved into having my own programs and mentoring and coaching. And so even though I'm known as, Frank Kern calls me the queen of copy, I've written copy for Frank. He's a friend. He was actually a client as well. And that's a great designation, but it's so much more than that. And that's the thing with our messaging. It's always more than the obvious. And there's so many layers and nuances to what we do. And I love seeing that potential for other people and helping them move forward with that into the entrepreneurial realm, because I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship. Someone comes to me and says, well, I'm looking for another job. It's like, I can't help you with that, because it's like, I wouldn't do that in a million years. So, but if you are called to something, I call it your divine assignment, that pull towards something, that thing that you must do. And we choose, we make a decision, and we either are going to answer that call or we're going to ignore it and go through life saying, gosh, wonder what happened if I'd done it, you know?
Right.
And it's really being that person. It's the embodiment of the identity that allows you to go to that next level. You know, I'm a big fan of Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and his most recent book, 10X is easier than 2X, kind of a thing. And he talks about, you know, you're really creating your present from your future, not from your past. And I love that. I love that concept, because if we all were creating from our past, good luck with that. We're going to just bump into those limitations that they're kind of like almost ingrained in us from ways that we were raised, for example, things that we took in as children, stories we've been hearing, you know, and you have to choose your companions, just like you said, of what room are you going to hang out in, and the family that doesn't understand or the friends that don't understand. And so kind of, I really believe in the integration of what you're doing in your business with who you truly are, your identity, but also choosing wisely who you share that with at certain levels. You know, like, you know, over here we've got maybe family member or friends that, you know, maybe they just don't need to hear about this because they don't understand that. And it's okay. It's not a judgment. It's just making a wise decision for yourself, so you keep the energy high for yourself and not allow negativity to start infesting your brain, kind of a thing. So
yeah, and I love that. Really utilizing the future self. Who do you actually need to become to have the business? What is it? Alan Sherfin says that, right? If you don't have the business that you want right now, it's because you haven't yet become the person that can have that business, that can hold that capacity, that vision.
That's a big one, because we end up, many of us, I also have, you know, I talk about this divine assignment aspect, but I also talk about spiritual amnesia. You know, have you ever had a really profound experience that to you interpret as a spiritual experience, something beyond just your ordinary thinking or your ordinary knowing, so to speak, in everyday life kind of stuff? And it's like, wow, you know, like earth shaking kind of thing. And then we kind of forget that we have this ability to tap into that wisdom, to tap into that guidance all the time. But other stuff gets in the way, and that's why I call it spiritual amnesia. It's like, oh yeah, that did happen, right? That did. You know, I actually knew that thing, you know, that came to me suddenly in a blinding flash of inspiration. You know, it's just, I think it's just our human nature that happens.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, so that's part of it, right? So we get in our own ways, and this is one of the reasons why it's so important to be surrounded by mentors. Like I say this, when I'm in the pits and I'm not doing great, the one thing that I do is borrow other people's perspective.
Right. And that's why a good mentor should also can believe in you when you don't, you know,
exactly.
Because we all have that. And to say, you know, to make it sound like this journey of mine has been just like, woo, smooth sailing. No, absolutely not. I mean, I worked alone for a long time. I think one of my struggles has been team building, you know, for my own personal team. You know, I didn't know how to do that. I'm still learning how to do that, you know, and having a lot of false starts, or hiring the wrong people, or hiring too many and not hiring enough. You know, I mean, there's things that some things are not intuitive for some of us. And that's one of them for me, how to do that, you know. So that's where also we need the guidance and the mentorship and the experiences, shared experiences, like in a mastermind, you know, that can be really super valuable to helping you overcome the areas that you're not brilliant in. And we all have those too.
So important. I would say I probably spent at least 6 figures in mentorship, both in personal mentorship and growth support, and as well as business strategies and mindset pieces and health and body stuff. I mean, I just invest heavily in myself, because I know that if I want to become the version of me that really can embody and hold the capacity of the vision that I'm really calling in, I'm going to have to really make sure that the vessel is tuned to that level of vision that I want to hold. And so that takes a lot of concerted effort and energy and investment and time to really build into it. And so when we look at, you know, we say that 1.7% of women entrepreneurs ever make it past 6-7 figures. What do you think is the things that hold women back from really stepping into that next level?
That's such a good question. And really so many, you know, it's the identity. There's for some women, there's guilt. I don't have guilt about it, you know, but it can be for some people like, oh, I'm making more than my parents. I'm making more than my friends. I remember early on when people were paying like $20,000 just to talk to me, you know, for a couple of hours, to have that kind of a consultation. And I would go to, I mean, it was long enough ago that I had to go to the bank to make the deposits. We didn't have some of the online banking. It sounds like 1910, but wasn't that long ago. But I go to the bank and stand in line, I get checks overnighted to me, and I would and I'd have to get a manager, right, to say, oh, what is it you do again? You get those kinds of and then you stand there thinking this person that's helping me probably takes an entire year to make what I have made in a day or a week, that kind of thing. And it had to get permission of approval for the deposits. And now everything is wire transfer and all of that now. But I think I had a neighbor then, we were staying on a piece of property with another mobile office I had, and they were outside and they looked at me and we had a new Jeep or something. And it was like, what is it you do again? Sell drugs? Because he just couldn't. I was around a lot of people that were retired, just not working at all, just kind of going with their retirement, 5 o'clock somewhere kind of things. And I wasn't doing that. I'd be like, well, I'll see you later. I got to go write a sales letter, and I wanted to do that. It wasn't that I wanted to be sitting around the campfire having a margarita at that point. I wanted to do what I was doing because I loved what I was doing. But other people don't necessarily get it. And so you can get kind of like these like zinger kind of comments. I think sometimes being a good steward of the money, are we afraid that we're not going to handle it well? Don't know what to do with it. Have never had it. I've certainly gone through those aspects too. The most I'd ever made in a year before I started as an entrepreneur online was about 32,000, as far as in a traditional job. I started doing a little bit more than that when we were selling stuff, but then there was the cost of all the things we were selling, and again, I wasn't even paying attention to the money of the bottom line. And so I think that's the other thing, this lack of education or awareness about what to do. How do I handle that? Will people expect more from me? Will they expect me to do more for them? Will I have to work all the time? What if I can't maintain? What if I get used to this lifestyle and suddenly it all falls apart? There's so many things. What do you think about that as far as how we limit ourselves? We're just can't imagine it for ourselves sometimes either.
Yeah, so I really look at this, and one of the books I love around this topic is The Big Leap.
Yeah.
It really talks deeply about this. And I think there's a lot of upper limits. And Dan Henderson, he talks about, how good can you stand it, right? How good get? How good can you hold the good? And I think that for me, like one of the biggest ones for me has been not wanting to outshine people. So that has been a really big upper limit for me. And it really came from growing up in socialistic Sweden. So I grew up in the 80s in Sweden. I'm born in 72. So 70s and 80s. And really had a lot of where everybody has to be the same, and teachers could never really recognize one student in front of another, say they did a good job. Like everybody had to be the same. And my family wasn't the same. My dad was one out of 7 entrepreneurs in our town. And our teachers would literally write it on the blackboard, the 7 privately owned businesses, which was one of my dad's. And all the kids staring me down and feeling really weird and ostracized just from that, like the other, how that was really a lot of shame and blame around, and people coming up to me and telling me that my dad was, sucking out of people dry and making money out of facts. And so I grew up with that mindset a lot. And so being an entrepreneur and especially being out online and talking about, how cool we are and a lot of our marketing thing, I've really had to overcome a lot of this idea that I don't want to outshine other people. And I think too, the other thing that I think is actually really painful as we are stepping into more and more growth in business and success in life is that not everybody comes with us. Right. And, I've had to let go of friends and people and colleagues, and it's really hard. Yeah. I love those people.
I had to do that too. And mine is the opposite from yours of the growing up, because I remember the days when this was still legal, that there were bill collectors banging on the door of the house, and I was being told, we'll act like we're not home. Lights being turned off, car being towed out of the driveway, big upsets in the house over money, over my mother working because my father accused her of being involved with whoever she worked with, this kind of stuff. And so there was all this violence around and always lack and there was lying going on and hiding of things. And so I grew up with that kind of money mindset, that I wanted to be able to go beyond that, but didn't have no idea how. There was never even talked about getting continuing education or anything. I was just kind of like on my own with that. And I think it can go the other way too, I'm not doing it that way. There can be more than that. But I had to, because my family situation, my family of origin had so much toxicity in it, I really had to release it. And I had to forgive and release, though, also that I could not fix it. I spent years trying to. And I finally realized during this entrepreneurial journey that, again, I never say this is what anybody else should do. This is what I had to do. But I knew that I was going to have to just move on, and we weren't really going to have much of a connection because it was just like anchors on me trying to fix the stuff I couldn't fix, that I wasn't responsible for, but yet felt responsible for. And I had this, again, I'm a very visual thinker, but when I literally did this click in my head that this is what needed to happen, I forgive you, I release you, and just move on for myself, that I'm going to have to move on by myself. I was like a corridor with doors. And I remember in my imaging of it, they were green on both sides. And when I made this decision, it was like they all started flying open like a cartoon, like boom, 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 right down the hallway. And the light just started streaming into that passageway. And there was a big shift in my financial well-being when that happened, as far as what kind of money was coming in, the speed with which it was coming in. It was just like something completely shifted energetically when I made that decision to release. And it does, it can be, it is hard. There's times just like, why can't I be like everybody else with this big, happy family? There's plenty of times that rears its head for me. PTSD times, seriously, I still startle really easily over loud noises and things like that still. And, it's just something that I accept that this is, I have. See, the thing I think when you have the trauma background, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but it's a hypervigilance also. I had to be really hypervigilant in my household because I didn't know what was happening out in the living room. If my father was going to, hit my mother, or some other scary thing was going to happen, this kind of thing. So I was always on alert, always on alert. And I think that hypervigilance, I also realized as an adult that I did actually a disembodied, out-of-body experience where I remember traumatic things that happened to me from as if I were up in the corner of the room. I thought everybody remembered stuff like that until I was working with some of these issues as an adult and realized, no, that's not the way people remember things. They remember it from inside their body, not outside looking at yourself, and different things that I learned to do to protect myself, right? And so, but that hypervigilance, I think, can live on in the sense that we're always kind of looking over our shoulder. We can easily be doing that. Well, what's coming? What's going to happen? And I think then that gets involved with the money aspect of what's going to go wrong with this. I can't possibly have this much, right? Kind of like you were talking about those upper limits. And so we maybe even subconsciously then do things to make sure that that does not happen, that we don't get that big, right? Who do you think you are kind of thing? And all of it. It's really complex in so many ways, but then I think it can be simplified in so many ways as well when we start to understand what's happening, those neural pathways that are firing, and we start retraining, basically recalibrating our those old stories that we tell ourselves and replacing them with ones that serve us instead of stop us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, I can absolutely relate to the hypervigilance, and looking over your shoulders and making sure that you're going to be safe, and really had to figure out how to not constantly scan my environment, for safety as an adult. And
I still sit on the end of a row. Do not put me in the middle of a row of seats.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit of that. And then just feeling like at any moment, the carpet could be pulled under your feet and you'll find yourself flat on the back somewhere and trying to figure it out. And so, those kind of experiences, I don't know if you necessarily overcome them. I think there's a spiral of growth that happens here. I don't think it's a linear process, but I think what it's really helped me is that now I can utilize some of that skill set when I'm working with people, because
exactly.
I am incredibly amazing at reading people, and I really trust my intuition when I'm reading people, and it's really supports me in my work as far as collaborating and working with my clients. And sometimes, that's part of what people oftentimes come to me for in mentorship, is my ability to see some of their blind spots so that we can have an opportunity to unpack some of the things that are getting in the way for their upper limits and where they really want to go. So having that intuitive hits and knowing those things, that skill set that was really created out of pure survival, in my childhood, now comes in and it really becomes one of my greatest gifts as well.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how that works? That some of the things that were the biggest hindrances or the biggest challenges become some of our greatest gifts. Like I was made fun of for talking too much. And so I kind of said, well, I got the last laugh. My use of words is what propelled me forward, my ability to do that. And I love what you're saying about that, being able to read. I talk about hearing what's not said, and hearing what needs to be said and letting things come through me that someone else needs to hear. And I've had some really amazing experiences. Ironically, almost all of them have been at marketing events where I didn't know the people, but that something came through me that I knew I was supposed to deliver to them, a message. And I try that one on where you're like, they're going to think I'm completely crazy when I do this, but yet I know I'm supposed to. And so paying attention to that and delivering, and always, every time, 100%, they tell me what it meant. They tell me, that this is, oh my gosh, kind of a thing. And so I also really appreciate how you're framing that out, because when we're talking about mentoring and coaching, it's not just strategy. It's not just how to write the words. It's not just, I've become like, the ChatGPT whisperer of how I go deeper and deeper and deeper using ChatGPT in collaboration, these kinds of things. But it's way more than that, because it's all of these other aspects that are integrated into how you become the person you're meant to be, the person you're choosing to be, you've decided to be. And even that can sound funny to some people, like, well, you're going to be this completely different person. Well, maybe, yeah, in certain ways, because that's what it takes to go past. You can't create something greater from the same place you're just staying. Low energy doesn't create high energy resources or outcomes, and creating more of the same does not create something greater than what you've already done. And so it is seeing that future self and looking at where you are now and stepping up to that future self in the current time, right? And not waiting for something. When this happens, I'll be able to do that. When that happens, I'll be able to do that. And oh my gosh, the road is strewn with boulders, Yeah. It's not like smooth sailing all the way, folks. I don't think so. It's not what I've experienced.
Not at all. And I think that so much of how we build businesses is we're going to do a bunch of stuff, right? To make the stuff happen, like take lots of action, do, and that hustle culture. And then hopefully we get to have some cool things when we do. And then we hope down the road that we're going to be able to be who we really want to be. And in reality, we really need to be first.
Absolutely.
Then we do a little bit, and then the having comes so much faster.
That's not a concept either one of us thought up. It's been around for a while, but it's just, there's such a misunderstanding about it and that's why even when people have similar messaging in certain ways, like in entrepreneurship, there's a particular way you deliver that. There's a particular way I deliver that. There's a particular way someone else will deliver it. And there's someone out there that needs your way, right? And there's someone else that needs mine. And that's just waiting for that. And so when we don't embrace that call we have in that entrepreneurial way of who we're supposed to reach and why and how, somebody's missing out, right? And not just us, but the person that was waiting for us. And I think a lot of people think, oh, I don't have anything special. I don't have a story, but we do. Each one of us does. And sometimes we need someone else to help see what that is and have that X-ray vision, or look, I can talk about looking around corners and through walls, kind of thing on behalf of someone else. And I think that as much as I love marketing and much as I love playing with words and all of those things, this is the part I love the most, is seeing the transformation that happens for people when they can come into a program with me and say, well, I thought I was here to learn how to write a sales page and learn how to write for a sales funnel. But what really has happened is my life has changed completely. And I love the integration of that. It shouldn't be, well, my work is over here and the rest of me is over here. And sometimes we get together in the middle. The ideal is this integration of that greater calling, that greater purpose, the skills, the strategies, the skill set, the tool set, all that, and the mindset and the understanding of that there's something greater beyond ourselves that we can tap into. I've had people tell me that was demonic. You're going to get flack from people. And so I think the other thing is courage, that you have to have the courage to know that sometimes your message might be polarizing in some ways, that but those people aren't for you. They're not meant to be in your world, working with you. Bless you. Bye. Don't let the door hit you in the butt and the way out, kind of a feeling of just releasing with love and not letting that stick to you. When someone says something like that, there's those that don't believe you can have that source of communication with your divine source, right? That
Yeah,
inner
yeah,
wisdom.
yeah. And I think Einstein actually was the one who said this, that you cannot create the change or find a solution to a problem from the same perspective that it was
Right.
created.
Like you've always
And
done,
so,
kind of.
so being able to really see things from a different perspective, I find to be one of the most profound things we can do for ourselves when we're feeling stuck. And I also, I rescue a lot of multi-six and multi-seven-figure business owners from their businesses, in the sense that so much of the time we build businesses that we separate out. So I believe that when we look at our trauma response, it's really about a fragmentation that starts to happen. Trauma really fragments us, and healing is really about bringing us together and creating that wholeness again. And I believe what you were just talking about, when you're talking about businesses and how we are separate, oh, this is my little business self, and this is my personal self, and this is my mother, this is how I mother, this is how I am in my wife role and with my partner, or whatever, how we separate ourselves out. That fragmentation usually creating a business that's then also is completely separate from who we really are. And there's not a lot of authenticity and meaning and fulfillment in a business like that. It creates this separation. It's almost like we're building a business out of a trauma response. And
From the person we used to be,
Right. Yeah. And then, so when we start really creating more wholeness in our being, we then have an opportunity to bring all of us to that business and that messaging and who we really are in the world. And it becomes more integrated. Then all of that, our own being, is being felt out in the world, right? This is really what you are looking to mirror when you are copywriting, right? Mirroring this connection that starts to happen for people. And this, when we start doing this and we're living more authentically for who we truly are, and authenticity, let's be honest, it's not sharing a vulnerable story that you're comfortable sharing on social media to gain importance, okay? That's not the kind of authenticity we're looking for. We're really talking about who you are at the core, and being willing to really show up with all of you, and not being just a shiny object that somebody can chase after, but really owning who you are. And that, to me, is one of the most attractive things. That's what I look for in my mentors. That's what I look for with the people I collaborate with and work with. It's that level of connection to who they really are and integration of all their parts that then create the wholeness, the beauty of that, if you are attracted to people out in the world, I promise you, most of the time it's because they figured out a way of really becoming more whole.
Yeah. And I think that can come also from kind of reframing what the past stories are that we're telling ourselves, that we can choose to reframe them into something that serves us, instead of just, this always happens to me. Of course, this is what happened. Look what's happened my whole entire life. You hear people say things like that. And that's where I talk about words to the third power, because it isn't just the words we're putting out there in our marketing. It's the words we're saying to ourselves, the words that we're thinking, the words that we're allowing in. And it's also the words we can receive, the guidance we receive from that divine source, what I consider a divine source. And anyone can label that however they want to label that, what they call that. But that it's almost like, I talk about artificial intelligence with ChatGPT, and I talk about ancestral intelligence. It's almost getting into more like epigenetics of what's baked into our DNA from generations before the one we remember, the family of origin, wherever the traumas that occurred, that type of thing, that it goes back even further. There's wisdom there. And I was thinking about that the other day, how for some of us, I was on a call the other day, and it was a younger guy, not that much younger, but he was saying, we all have uncles and grandfathers and things that have told us stories, and this is why stories are so important. And I was like, no, we don't all have that. And so being aware of how we're using our words, how they're hitting the person that's listening. But also the bigger part of that for me that I've been thinking about was, well, what if we didn't have that? And how do we trust that ancestral intelligence? And so to me, it's a healing thing to think, even before that, there were, and even in the traumatic things of a family, there's still value. There's something that you got from that, something that serves you now, even if you didn't end up with the kind of relationship that you wish you had had in your family, kind of a thing. And so trusting that lineage, that there's strength there, there's wisdom there, and it's already part of who we are, and drawing from the best of the past to create the future from our present. If that makes sense at all. That's kind of how I see the journey.
So much sense. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful. And truth is, I could sit here chatting with you for the day about all all this stuff. I mean, this is so.
Why don't you just come to Arizona?
I would. I totally would. I love Arizona. My husband is from Arizona.
Tucson.
Yeah, I love Tucson. We spent a lot of time in Tucson, actually.
The
It's
old
a great
Pueblo.
place.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
We were in
I mean,
Taos, and that looked amazing also. So
yeah, I love Taos. Taos, like, so, yeah. So my husband is from Arizona, but, I'm from Europe. So now we're in Texas, Austin, Texas, but we are having our eye on Taos. We want to escape.
yeah. I was thinking, why? I just picture you in New Mexico. For a while, I was just thinking, oh well, Madeline's in New Mexico, and it's like, no, wait a minute. She's like, what are you doing in Texas? I've already got a picture of you in New Mexico.
I've asked myself for 7 years that I've been here.
I think it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to end up in New Mexico because I'm already seeing it. So I just got to tell
that. Yes, no, it's totally happening. And my husband is a musician, and so Austin is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
for his career, and it is a really cool city. We have an amazing community here, and I love the people that we connected with. But it's not my place. The humidity.
You look like you love the open spaces, the big sky, the vistas.
Yes.
I so relate to that. Our place here has an unobstructed view of the mountains. It's called Saddleback, and we have this beautiful view in the saguaros. We hear the coyotes howling day and night, actually. And we've had bobcats on our property. I have to have that space, that openness, that feeling.
Yeah, that's what I crave too. So I love that. Yeah. So it's happening. It's coming. It's just,
all right. Then you'll be just next door. It's just
going in that general direction. Yes.
Way easier to drive to Taos than Austin.
Absolutely, way easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, where can people connect with you? What's the best way to find you?
Well, they can find me all over social media. I'm the Tina Lorenz. I had to have a designation, so I thought it might as well be the. You can find me at tinalorenz.com. Just Google my name, But tinalorenz.com is a good starting place, and I actually have multiple websites, so it's easier just to remember that one. And I do a challenge once a month. I'm kind of shifting that around a little bit right now so that it's better just to find me at tinalorenz.com or on social media at the Tina Lorenz.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, I just absolutely loved chatting with you. This was amazing.
This has really been fun. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I think we could just continue. Well, just keep right on going. Thanks so much for inviting me. I really loved our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So much. Cool.